Make ready unmade. Print shops don't sleep. They lower their voices. After the last design, student wipes a smudge of ink into her hair, and the day pressman abandons the radio to its own static. The keystone lowers the house lights and talks in platin creaks and roller sighs. Oil breathes from the iron. Type trays cool. The Vandercook proof press ticks like a metronome that forgot it was in charge. If you've never stood in a shop at 2:06 a.m. and watched a sheet of cotton rag lift from the tympan, as if reluctant to stop being touched, you don't know how a room can ask you for honesty without moving its mouth. I'm Jonah, night printer, keeper of coins and grudges, a man whose thumbs remember pica more than birthdays. My desk is a scarred maple slab with a coffee ring that looks like a lunar eclipse and three dark crescents where someone hot set a composing stick down as if the type wouldn't complain. In the top drawer, a bone folder, a coin key, a tin of blue carpenter's chalk I shouldn't use near white stock, and a habit of saving the paper strips cut off by the guillotine because waste is louder after midnight. Ava, my wife then, could make a room perform its own reflection. Interior stylist, brand lightning, she knew how to persuade a shelf to confess it had always wanted that vase. We collided at a launch party for a shoe brand whose logo I had set in lead as a favor for a mutual friend. I liked the way she stood like a decision was a muscle. She liked that my hands looked like work without apology. We kept Wednesdays because the world is as faithful as a calendar. She'd slide past the roll-up door with a hood up and a grin for the night guard who liked to pretend he didn't see. And I'd be at the Vandercook with the cylinder already cocked and the ink knives laid out like reasons. If this sounds like bragging, I'm only building the room. There's a notch in my lower back courtesy of the feed board on the C&P where she once pushed me and laughed when I knocked a stack of cover stock into an avalanche soft enough to forgive. There's a comma of a birthmark near her left rib I could find in the dark. There's a way she said, "We have 10 like a countin'," and I would take 9 and tuck one under my tongue in case famine came. The first oddness arrived as seconds out of rhythm. 0014 side door, held open sixes. Doors here don't like to be held. They complain to the log with righteous little pings. The wash-up sink in back wore a lipstick ghost the color of late plums, a thin bruise on stainless. The press wash smelled faintly of mint. On the feed board of the Vandercook, a single hairline rule lay where I didn't leave it, the kind of hairline that likes being lost down drains. I told myself a generous story. The day team ran late. An intern with an appetite for lipstick and learning ran a sheet through for her portfolio. A photographer borrowed our texture and paid us in tags. The next Thursday, the seconds repeated. 0014 held its breath. The wash smelled like a cocktail apology. The hairline rules collected like strays under the cylinder. Under the base of the ink slab, when I stooped to wipe, a tiny clear disc winked in my headlamp. Not an earring back, a silicone earbud tip, designed to be forgotten. Ava proposed open on a Wednesday while we folded towels in halves. The printer in me felt the itch for thirds. With rules, she said, with that care architects use for load bearing. With care, with us first. She didn't touch me while she said it, which is our house dialect for truth. I wanted to be as large as the kludge when it lifts a run that shouldn't fit. We wrote it down. No one from the keystone. No clients. Tell before, not after. Protection always. Our bed as sovereign territory. The first week after the treaty, she kissed me like a ceasefire. The second, like an apology that didn't have the right noun yet. The third, at 11:09 p.m., she texted, "Client tasting ran long, don't wait up," and the shop logs offered 0014 like a ritual. I didn't set a trap, not at first. You don't weaponize a sanctuary, but secrets love to hear themselves walk, so I tuned the room to listen. I dusted the inside plate of the side door handle with a breath of chalk from my tin and a smear of Prussian blue, just enough to bloom under a UV wand and kiss the skin of someone who chose the wrong verb. I placed a single sheet of 110 lb bright white on the Vandercook, set to bear down on nothing, and tore a sliver from its corner so I'd know if someone ran it. I slid a sliver of paper under the coin on the left side of the chase. If a hand tightened it, the telltale would curl. I laid a hair of monofilament across the corridor at shin height, not to catch, only to teach a stride to confess hurry. 0014 held sevens. 0016, the hum of the little compressor for the die cutter kissed the edge of the silence. At 0019, my ghost sheet returned with a smudge 3 inches inboard, a crescent where someone's thumb doubted discipline. The monofilament lay cold-polite on the floor, moved aside by hands that knew how to be gentle with a trap they didn't understand. In the wash, the mint sang louder. On the inside plate of the side door, chalk galaxies that could only have come from a palm that owed me before. I waited at my desk like a man who has learned to listen to a Platon. Ava entered with hair pinned by a decision and a mouth that could have refused to be honest and didn't. I flicked the UV wand. A faint constellation woke on her wrist where pulse negotiates. She looked down, and I watched a story select itself. "Don't make me the villain," she said. "Not a plea, a fatigue." "I asked for before," I answered. "I thought I did," she said, and in her grammar client tasting ran long counted. She had kept tempo. I had asked for a different music. He stepped in with a jacket over his shoulder like the room had invited him personally. Kai Mercer, streetwear designer turned community darling whole brand built on craft meets city. He and Ava had built 3 launch parties that smelled like money and cardamom. In person, he looked like a mirror that had learned to walk. He didn't offer me eyes. "We'll go," he said to the air, to the press, to any witness not taking notes. "You won't perform in here," I said, and I held the door because the Keystone has hosted better men badly and worse men politely, and deserved my attention more than my anger. We stood by the roll-up and watched the alley try to be a river. The building breathed when they left. We separated with competence, the ruthless kindness of people trained to carry breakables. Ava found a loft where the windows applauded mourning. She took the bar cart and the flutes and the blazer that convinced rooms to correct their posture. I kept the chipped mug by the wash-up sink, and the way my hand knows the Vandercook's crank without looking. The lawyers were gentle, the sort of gentle that makes you want to replace the felt on the tympan just to hear a new sound. Work held me up by the collar. A wedding suite needed a gold foil that fought like a cat. A bookstore anniversary wanted a broadside with Baskerville that looked like it had swallowed a lighthouse. An intern said a line of type wrong way round, and we hung it on the wall to remember humility. I slept afternoons with solvent in my hair, and the city grinding its teeth 2 floors down. Yara arrived 3 weeks into my new life carrying a crate of frames like she had invented rectangles. Custom framer next door, carpenter's pencil tucked behind one ear, a smudge of shellac on her wrist like a mismatched bracelet. She slid a stack of matte board onto my table as if negotiating with a storm. When she lifted a sheet of glass, the tendons in her forearm pronounced themselves like a piece of music. She smells like cedar and orange oil and a nerve that doesn't apologize. "You ever print with the rollers too low just to remind yourself pain isn't interesting?" she asked, eyeing my ink distribution like a teacher disguised as amusement. "Once," I said. "It wasn't an experiment worth repeating." She grinned and set her knuckles on the feed board the way a person greets a friend. We began as neighbors who owe each other favors. She'd bring me offcuts of museum board and tell me to stop pretending I didn't want them. I'd unlock the alley gate early when she had to take a delivery nobody had time to sign for. The first time she touched me, it was my wrist, an adjustment so I wouldn't mar a freshly inked plate with a hasty palm. "There," she murmured, and the body I had been renting decided to stay. We made rules before we made anything else. No bodies against my press. No hands near her finished frames with glue mourning. Yes to the little hallway where the skylight forgets to be stingy at 3 a.m. Yes to the dry table after last cleanup when the rag bin smells like metal and citrus. Yes to my office with the lights down and the camera pointed at the other door. The Vandercook ticking like a metronome we were not required to obey. The first time she kissed me, we stood in the threshold of the ink room, half in and half in, no out, not where red safe lights paint a person honest. Her mouth tasted of orange peel and heat from the back of the throat. She kept her eyes open for a beat, not to check the door, the shop, and I tell each other when we're not ready to share, but to make sure she was choosing me with the kind of light we had. I put my palm against the waist of her apron and felt the breath that lives under courage. We are not children. Speed is for fear. She leaned me against the safe side of a cabinet, and I wrote my name under her ear with my mouth, and she made a sound that lives in the same drawer as May Creddy. Small adjustments, patient pressure, a commitment to clean edges. When my hip knocked the coin key to the floor, we both laughed into each other's teeth because nothing is sexier to a printer than an honest mistake you can fix. We counted to 10 and used 9, not because we believe in scarcity, but because the last minute is a tip you leave the night for seating you at all. The gala came because the city runs on stage generosity. Craft and City, they called it, and they hung our broadsides in a room that pretended it invented brick. Ava arrived wearing a dress that made mirrors learn. Kai drifted in her wake with a camera that turned rooms into his face. We nodded like adults who did not want the building to carry what we could carry. Yara wore black because black forgives glue. She carried a tray of tiny frames with place cards nested like swallows, and smiled in a way that made me reconsider the usefulness of gravity. I did my rounds after the way I always do. Side door, obedient, wash-up, mintless, Vandercook, oiled and expectant. In my desk drawer, the Altoids tin I keep for small regrets held 2 clear earbud tips and a straight pin bent into a question mark. I snapped the lid with the softness a person uses when a door has earned quiet. Ava came by days later to sign a final paper. She stood at the doorway like a person who remembers being a key and is trying to learn being a guest. We talked about furniture. Mine is functional, hers is aspirational. We practiced forgetting to look at the Vandercook like it owed us a metaphor. Kai posted from somewhere with light that forgives skin. The world kept the same weather. I'd like to tell you I went to war, that I rolled the shop camera, let the red light glow, made a feed of corrections that shamed the right people, and got me clapped on the back by men who love rules when they save their feelings. I did not. I have been inside enough machines to know how much grit it takes to smooth one again after you pour sand on purpose. I walked 2 bodies out of a door and saved my malice for registration. Yara learned my temper the way a press does, cyclically. I learned the look she gives a corner when it insists on warping, and she refuses to let it embarrass itself. She learned that I get quiet before I get angry, the breath that takes inventory of verbs. I learned where she keeps a pencil in her hair and used that knowledge for something crass and holy. Our erotics are patient. The green light above the guillotine hums. She hooks a finger in my belt loop like a bookmark. In the dry table glow, she plants her palms on either side of my hips and says, "Stay," with her mouth on my jaw. I yank a drawer an inch out with my heel to keep the cabinet from complaining and press my chest to her back when she changes a blade, neither of us pretending it's only about leverage. We keep our hands off the press like it's a church. We let the rest of the room practice being human. One night, the side door chimed at 00:14 because habit is an animal that lives longer than the marriage that fed it. I went to the monitor out of muscle memory and saw only the alley figuring out rain. I laughed into my knuckles and went back to Yara, who had her hair down and a smudge of pains gray on her wrist like an oath. We left a thumbprint on a sheet of Maycredi and hung it on the wall to remind ourselves that mess is also evidence of presence. If you walked past the Keystone on a Thursday after midnight and looked through the street window, you'd see two people who make a careful mess and then clean it like worship. You might notice a man lean into a woman's shoulder while the press ticks behind them, his hand flat to the maple where a coffee ring is becoming a family story. You might see a woman kiss a man as if the word apprentice had just been promoted to partner, then sharply look at a corner of matte board like it owed her rent. You might not see the Altoids tin move from drawer to pocket and back. That's fine. It's punctuation, not plot. I lock the side door and run my thumb over the burr in the plate at hand height where everyone's story rubs itself honest. I wipe the ink slab until the blue resolves into a clean nothing. I make the Vandercook safe and listen for that little click it does when it agrees. Yara steals my last clean minute because she can. I let her because that's the rule that has outlived all the others. Tip the night. Print shops don't sleep. They lower their voices and wait for you to match them. On the walk home, the city smells like wet cardboard and oranges from somewhere that pretends a truck is a C. I put my hand in my pocket and feel the old Altoids tin like a relic from a museum nobody visits twice. Not a trophy. A reminder that there are better uses for quotation marks than enclosing a lie. We have 10. We use 9. We fold the last under our tongues like a slip of paper that keeps a door from shutting too hard. And in the morning, the first sheet we pull off the tympan looks back at us unblinking and says, in the honest voice paper uses when it's still damp again,